gentlemen, it's gone 2 o'clock. Welcome to the Police and Crime Panel this afternoon. If we can start by looking at the agenda, and first of all, item 1 is the minutes of the confirmation hearing held on the 21st of September, pages 3 to 10. If anyone has any questions or comments, please catch my eye. If not, can I propose those to the floor? Thank you. That takes us to item 2, minutes of the panel meeting held on the 21st of September, pages 11 to 18 in your bundle. Mr. Bob Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out that the heading on the first page refers to Monday. It should say Wednesday. Monday was the funeral of Her Majesty the Queen.
Thank you very much. We'll make sure that the new copies are presented with that date. Thank you. Any other comments? Again, can I propose these from the chair?
Agreed.
Thank you. That takes us to item 3, apologies for absence.
Thank you. We have an apology today from Councillor Lee, and we also have an apology from Councillor Inglis.
Thank you very much. If we can move to item 4, declarations of interest by members and officers. First of all, A, disclosable pecuniary interests. Someone wishing to declare?
So I've got a non-pecuniary interest as a VRU ambassador, just to be on the safe side.
Thank you very much, Councillor McRae, thank you. And for B, any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary? Non-declared, thank you. That takes us to item 5, the work programme. If I can hand over to my colleague from Democratic Services, thank you.
Thank you. The work programme for this meeting covers a few items. To start with, we have the usual requests for any items that panel members may wish to be added to the work programme. If there are any topics you'd like adding, please make them known. We also wanted to draw your attention to a Police and Crime Panels webinar that was hosted by the Local Government Association and also the recent Police, Fire and Crime Panel Conference, hosted by Frontline Consultancy, which this year the theme was, and bear with me while I'm just double checking, but it was essentially around changing culture and moving things forward.
Thank you. I think one of our panel members did attend the conference, Mrs. Harding, and would like to give colleagues some feedback from it. Thank you, Mrs. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I attended. It was very well attended by the other panels around the country. Sorry. I think the best thing about the actual conference was the networking. We were able to establish how other panels operate and learn from each other in great detail. In the afternoon, we went into breakout sessions, and again, I think it was more intimate, and we were able to find out how people dealt with issues that we had within the panels itself. And not everybody operates the same way as us, and I learned quite a lot from that too. If anybody would like to learn more about what happened at the conference, they're very welcome to ask me after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there things that you found interesting that we could adopt as a panel?
One thing that was interesting, that perhaps the pre-meeting that we have, the majority of the panels do that by Zoom a few days before the actual meeting, so that they're able to look at the questions and work out if there's anything else they'd like to talk about or elaborate. So that was something I learnt, and quite a lot of panels do that. Another thing that they do is they sometimes break out for task and finish items so that they can have a subcommittee for like the budget or anything that they feel that certain members of the panel are more experienced in finance than others.
Thank you. Perhaps certainly quite interesting to hear that the pre-panel meeting takes place via Teams or Zoom, whichever platform people use. I think that would be of some interest to members, and perhaps outside the meeting we can take soundings as to how people feel about that. I'm sure it might be a better use of everyone's time. I know it's quite difficult sometimes travelling from various parts of the county to come to County Hall for the pre-meeting, so I think it's something we ought to explore outside the meeting. Certainly when we have our pre-meeting with the Commissioners team, we always do that by Teams and find it very valuable. People can then get on and do other things, so that's quite useful. Perhaps outside the meeting we could also pick up the point you made about the use of subgroups as we roll into another new year in due course. Thank you very much. Any questions to Mrs. Harding at all? Well, thank you very much for that feedback. Thank you. And I'll ask our Democratic Services Officer to put the other matter on the agenda for us to consider. Thank you. That takes us to item 6, Police and Crime Commissioner's Update Report, pages 25 to 50. Before just handing over, if I could just ask members, if you're asking any questions of the Commissioner after this presentation, if you could confine your questions to those beginning with 6, so that we don't stray into the papers, number 7 and so forth. That would be really helpful, thank you. Commissioner, welcome.
Thank you very much. Oh, that's very disconcerting as it zooms in. I'll try and get used to that, thank you. Should have powdered my nose. I know you've all had sight of the report, but I just thought it was worth me going through and highlighting some bits of it to you. So if I take you to page 2 of the report, which is page 26 of your pack, I talk about making our streets, villages, towns and cities safer. One of the things that we're really proud of in our office is all the money that we've secured for the safer streets. And the round 4 rollout is really cracking on at pace now. That's £3 million of Home Office funding. Just worth sharing that actually it was on the Safer Streets 3 that we had the initiative to put the safer refuge point cameras up. It was the first, but we did it first in Nottinghamshire, and one of these in Bassetlaw actually helped to prevent an attempted suicide on the 13th of October. What happened? Somebody who was in crisis pressed the help point on the camera, and I was delighted that the trained Vork CCTV operator engaged with that young woman, and were able to get the police were able to get to a place of safety. So it's just putting a bit of colour on there of what difference these cameras are making. If I take you to 3.7, that's talking about nighttime economy interventions. We've been working with our partners in the city to finalise some nighttime economy interventions, building on the recommendations for the independent needs assessment. And the plan is that we're going to be rolling out further training for nighttime economy staff, developing and promoting key safety messages, looking at long-term interventions that will have a positive effect. And that should go for the next 3 to 5 years. If I take you to 3.12, which is the youth diversion work that we're doing, we've appointed a provider to deliver accredited youth work training to the voluntary and community sector. This is something that it would be really helpful if you could let people know about. This means we have free training available to train and accredit youth workers. So it could be volunteers who are in organisations that you know who want some professional training. It's been done through Base 51. There was a gap there for some of our voluntary community sector to get their training. So we're able to do that through VRU funding. We've also Divert Plus has been live since April, and there's some really good case studies that are coming through. I'll just share one with you quickly. A 17-year-old male was arrested for knife and cannabis possession, and he was accepted onto the Divert trial group. His mum was really worried about his behaviour, and he stopped going to school and stopped going out. But because he was able to have a mentor and a trained youth worker with him, he actually disclosed he was scared to go out because he was there was some gang tensions, and he was really frightened what was going to happen to him, because those accused of stabbing him actually lived on the same street. So Divert Plus continued to work with him, and the police are managing the threats to him and his family. We wouldn't have found that out had we not have had that intervention in place. Take you to 3.21, Serious Violence Duty and Implementation Group. Just to remind you, the serious violence duty isn't on us as Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. It's on our partners, but we're working really hard to prepare for the new duties and responsibilities under the Police Crime Sentencing and Court Act, and that's going to be coming in February 23. So it's coming in quickly. So again, when you speak to people, do check that they're aware of that. If I move on to preventing violence against women and girls, which you know is a subject really close to my heart, I hinted at it last time, but it's in this time's report that we were successful in securing another £1 million funding for children affected by domestic abuse fund. This is so we're able to put therapy in place, and it's just breaking that cycle. It's so important that those young people don't think what they're seeing at home is a normal, healthy relationship. So I'm very proud of the work that's happening there. You'll see that we've had the first meeting of the Antisocial Behaviour Task Force. All local authorities were represented there, and also youth offending, fire service and the police. It's really a real good opportunity to share best practice and work out what more we can do. We're in the middle of getting ready the recommissioning of the victim care service. We've recruited 2 victims to help us co-produce the new service, and also we're working with HMPPS to develop a new restorative Nottinghamshire service. If I move on to the 3.38, if I just mention the SERAC. With profiling demand, I'm working on a programme of expansion into the county. Now, it's an innovative project and it's receiving national and international attention, but we are aware that there's some capacity issues there, so we're working with the partners in the city to address this. But it's doing some amazing work. So if I skip on a little bit on to 5, if I talk about engagement, I've been really busy. I'm doing walkabout Wednesdays, I've been on ride-alongs, this chat with Caroline. We'll be launching our monthly newsletter shortly, and in December we're going to be having some focus groups. On the national picture, I think it's just worth flagging Her Majesty's Inspectorate thematic inspection on vetting, misconduct, and misogyny. We've been well served in Notts, our Chief Constable being the national thematic lead for this portfolio. Via the Accountability Board, I've received real reassurance on that we're going to be looking at the national recommendations, and I will be doing this again at the next Accountability Board. Notts Police are assessed as good in this area, with only one key area for improvement. And then we've gone to the financial outlook, which and the budget. And if any questions on that, I'm sure Gillian can answer when we get to questions. But finally, I'm really keen to just say a few words to our outgoing Chief Constable, about our outgoing Chief Constable. It's not in my report, but I can't let this be Mr. Guilford's last meeting without flagging up a few things. Firstly, recruiting a Chief Constable, I think, is the most important thing that a Police and Crime Commissioner does. And it was my predecessor, Paddy Tippin, who made a wise choice of picking Craig to be the Chief Constable, and also for you all to confirming in post. I wish Craig all the best as he goes on to his next adventure in the West Midlands. But I'd like to thank Craig for what he's done here. I think about he's left a real legacy for our next Chief Constable to build on. He's cut crime. He's made sure we've caught criminals, and it's created a Nottinghamshire police force that people want to work at. I mean, the fact that we've got more officers than when he started, and also the using the opportunity of the uplift to get a more representative workforce is something we should be very proud of. I could go on for a long time, but I just want to say thank you very much. Of course.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner. We were reassured by the Deputy Chief Constable Rachel Barber that all police officers turn on their body cam videos when they're attending the scene of a crime. It's been reported in the press that an officer entered a building without wearing his body cam video. I'm not going to go into detail, but it was taken to a misconduct hearing. I think the panel would like some reassurance from you how the police are operating their body cam videos, and has there been a change in procedure since this event? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Harding. I am aware of the incident that you're talking about, and whilst I think that happened in 2017 or 2018, it was a long time ago and before I was in place. But there has been learnings from that, and operationally I might pass over to my Chief Constable, but I am assured that body worn camera is turned on. And actually, there was a mistake made in that case, and it's quite right that actually some compensation has been rightly given to the poor lady who wasn't treated to the high standard that I would expect of my officers. I'm not sure if the Chief wants to add anything.
Yeah, just in answer to the question, back then, body worn video wasn't a personal issue, and a few years ago, I made sure for the front line it is personal issue. So the wearing of it is, custom and practice now. So I couldn't see that situation developing again. And as the Commissioner says quite rightly, despite my best efforts, the outcome wasn't what I would have hoped for.
Can I just clarify then that they have the body cam videos on all the time when they're... I don't understand the operational effect of that. Thank you.
Yeah, specifically, an officer chooses when to activate the body worn video, because obviously there's a sort of like capacity with the system, etc. So when they go to an incident, just before they go in, they switch it on. But obviously, if something comes across them right in their face, they don't get a chance to switch it on, or if somebody's confronting them in that sort of way. But they obviously try and do so. We capture nearly all of the stop searches on body worn video. That they are just so useful, unbelievable. They're really good when it comes to sort of playing things back, learning complaints, and they reassure the public. But also, I think they serve to sort of reduce problems as well, because some people's behaviour is modified by the fact that the red light's on or the green light's on and it's going.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to confirm that in court, it's a very useful means of giving evidence to the court on what has actually happened at the scene of the crime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Khan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 28, paragraph 311, talks about some of the meetings and visits you have undertaken around rough sleeping and protecting the public to make communities feel safe. Please can you give the panel an overview of the outcomes of these meetings and visits and how they are influencing your future priorities, planning and commissioning?
Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. I actually learnt a lot by going out and seeing what the real picture was out there. One of the trips I did was 5 o'clock in the morning around the car parks, and it is shocking. It's so there's some people with substance misuse issues and mental health issues, but some people, massive vulnerabilities there too. And I do think that this is not just a police issue to deal with. We know it's really important. We know the homeless people, the duty is on the local authority, so we need to make sure that we really work together. I went out with the Home Office to look at the work we do on something called Op Compass in the city, and that was really great because it was making sure we had mental health support workers framework were there too, and just doing the joined up response. So we are working as a partnership, but we do need to pull in, everybody together. And when I spoke with the Integrated Care Board recently, the director there, I mentioned it too.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Khan?
Yes, please. So it's really good to hear the partnership element of it. I just think it would be really valuable if, when you do come to the city, if you could let one of the portfolio holders know that we can walk with you and then we can pick our bit up. Because I did note from your papers you are due in the city again on the 21st of December for a walkabout. So it'd be really good if we could.
Definitely make sure you get invited along, and the new chief constable's coming with me on that one as well. So it'll be really good. I'll make sure you get reach out to City on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodings, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under paragraph 3.26, you report back about the focus of attention that the new domestic abuse partnerships have brought on that issue. But it goes on to say that it's resulted in sexual violence and abuse becoming somewhat sidelined. And that is obviously a concern, especially considering the really low conviction rates for things like rape, sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, etc. So can you tell us what action you're going to take to try and address that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Woodings. Obviously, there's a statutory duty with regard to domestic abuse, but we were worried that domestic violence was getting lost. Sexual violence was getting lost. So that's we're looking at sexual violence governance to increase that. And actually, we're putting a board together. We've been working on that to make sure nothing falls through the gaps.
I wonder if you could give us some timelines for that. Obviously, we're about to recommission our sexual violence services for the city as well. So we've had some local meetings with lots of the different partners involved. Yeah. If you've got any definitive timelines around that action plan, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, if that's a big because my chief exec has been heading this up for me.
Hi, Councillor Woodings. So we met earlier in the year, I think roughly May time, when we raised it, and there were several members of Nottingham City Council and Nottinghamshire County Council, as it happens, who've been very close to this and who also identified the same problem in relation to sexual violence governance. There's a further meeting to take place, I think early next month as well, But essentially, what we're working towards now is just properly defining the governance strands in terms of reporting into both the local authority, domestic abuse partnerships, as well as the community safety partnerships, because they need to be cited on this. So it's, we can have a group that corrals this and keeps it high on the agenda and make sure that that links in and influences commissioning, for instance. But it also needs to connect laterally to all of those other elements as well.
Sorry, did I miss it? I didn't actually hear sort of when you hope to get this board up and running. I appreciate there's lots of different governance layers that you have to go through first to make sure that everyone is included and it links in properly, but have you got a timeline in mind?
Sorry, I didn't address that because it is a partnership effort. So whilst we are coordinating it, we want to make sure, but we do anticipate that will be early next year.
Thank you. Did you want to come back to the Councillor Woodings, or are you content? No. Got another question. Did you want to go on to do that one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to ask about the new Nottinghamshire Criminal Justice Partnership Board. We'd like an update on the last board meeting, but specifically, I'm quite interested in the court backlogs, how we're trying to fast track those court proceedings. Obviously, there's massive issues with the common platform at the moment, which is very clunky and difficult for our legal advisors to use. And also, and this might be a technical question, we understand there's going to be a difference in process to police cautions from January onwards. And we're very interested in, as I say, the number of out of court disposals. I know there is a courts committee that looks at out of court disposals and the use of cautions and what they're being used for. But so can we have sort of like an update on what you're doing? I appreciate your powers are actually limited, your levers are limited in relation to court backlogs, but it is important because you're the voice of the victims of crime as well. So could you sort of give us an update about how that's progressing?
Lots of questions. Questions there, Councillor Wooding. Would it be helpful to have a report on what happens at the Criminal Justice Assurance Partnership presented in a future meeting?
If it tied with when your next meeting is, it could come then probably to the next meeting of this committee, if that's helpful.
Yeah, if that's helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you want to come back,
Yeah.
Councillor Woodings?
Sorry, I just want to ask about the cautions issue in January and what's happening there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We've been having lots of conversations, but I might get the language.
I'll try not to, but at the moment it's the April deadline that we're working to when the cautions framework or out of court disposals get simplified somewhat. So whereas at the moment there's lots of different sort of entry routes into it, there'll be conditional cautions which will have some form of either RJ or restorative practice attached to them. So referring into treatment, that sort of area. The simple caution is disposed of. Sorry, restorative justice. The simple caution, as we've known them for many, many years, disappears, or there'll be community resolutions, which is another method of obviously resolving something without putting that person into the criminal justice system. At the moment, that's scheduled nationally for the 1st of April 2023, and we're obviously just working alongside the Commissioner's Office around some of the support functions that can support the conditional caution to make them actually sort of worthwhile and beneficial and preventative as they should be.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry.
So I just wanted to come back with regards to court backlogs. Really complex issue, but I'm completely with you that our victims and survivors need quicker justice. So one of the things that we do at the Criminal Justice Partnership Assurance Board is look at how we can make sure things happen quicker, what gaps there are, and we just. It's just all of us want the same thing, but so we work out how we can speed things up.
Well, thank you, Chair. I agree that it would be really helpful to have a full report on exactly, what metrics you as the Police and Crime Commissioner are actually driving through that committee. And it would be good to have the court system here as well, because I seem to recall that the last time we invited them, they weren't able to make it. So it'd be good to have somebody from the court system along as well, to sort of explain the actual situation. As I say, I'm very interested in the number of out of court disposals as well, and the usage of those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The agreement with regards to the courts coming here, I'm just really clear that as a police and crime panel, you're here to ask me questions. You're not here to ask questions of the courts. So I'm not sure whether they'd be comfortable in coming to this.
No, if I can just interject, we did take some action to try and influence the court service some considerable time ago. And we were very pleased that you were taking up the cudgel, actually, Commissioner, and creating a local forum. And I know it's not been going that long, but I think anything that you can bring to us to show that actually it's making a difference. Because in the past we tried to support your former colleague in that role without very much success, I hasten to add. And you're quite right. We could only invite anyone from the courts to come along if they so wished. We have no powers to ask people to turn up just because we've written to them. But the fact that you've taken on this role as chairing the local board, we want to make sure that we support you in everything you're trying to do in bringing what are quite disparate parts of an organisational arrangement together. So, and as you know, we do have some serving magistrates on this panel, and naturally are quite interested in hearing some success stories along the way. I hope I've articulated that on behalf of my two colleagues well.
And thank you so much for your support, because it's such an important issue. And Councillor Harding's been to one of my criminal justice assurance board and seen me in action. And I do hold people's feet to the fire, don't I?
That's what I was going to add. I've been an observer at one of the meetings, and I was very impressed that you were able to get everybody from the courts to attend this meeting, because I think that's a rare feat in itself. And also you set them targets to ensure that various elements were completed. I don't think that's ever been done before. I may be wrong, but it gives them an incentive to improve the situation, which hasn't been good in court. And we have got a backlog in the Magistrates' Court and in the Crown Court. And both, there were representatives from both the Magistrates' Court and the Crown Court at this meeting, as well as the Crown Prosecution Service. And I'm not sure who came from the police, but there was somebody there too. So it means that you're getting everybody together to look at the situation and improve the situation. So I wish you success with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Introna, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just firstly, can I just also thank Chief Constable Guildford for his service to Nottinghamshire and wish him all the very best in his new role going forward. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming today. Just with regard to your comment on 5.3 with the chat with Caroline sessions, I see that you've had one. I just wondered if you could give us a bit of feedback of how that went, how it was advertised, and just some general feedback on the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Introna. It was advertised on social media, and it was interesting because a lot of people wanted to book for a chat with Caroline, but what we did, we found out what we wanted to have a chat about, and some of it we could sort out very quickly before it actually got as far as waiting for a chat with Caroline. And actually, one of the ladies who did come for a chat with Caroline was just giving us some fantastic feedback of some PCSOs that she'd got working in her area that were coming out to a youth club. So it was a really worth doing. And I've got a series of chat with Carolines coming up. But sometimes we don't have to wait for the chat with Caroline. If we can address something quickly, I've got a fantastic team in my office to do that.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yes, please. Just given that they're advertised on social media, with regard to things like virtual meetings or even making a telephone call, which most can do, but given that they are advertised on social media, what can we do to make sure that, such as the elderly or maybe some of the more vulnerable of our residents that aren't perhaps quite as technically savvy, might be able to have access to these sorts of meetings as well, please?
We are working on communication generally to make sure people know what a police and crime commissioner does and what I can do to support. So it's ongoing. The newsletter will be, as well as going out electronically, we will be getting those printed and going to like doctors' surgeries and libraries and just getting them out and about, just to increase people's knowledge of what a police and crime commissioner can do to support. And I'm always looking to put stuff in the press, and also the newsletter that we will be doing will be coming out to anybody who's signed up for it, but also councillors as well, and they can let people know that I'm available to meet up and have conversations.
Thank you. Mr. Vaughan, is it relation to the same topic? I know I've got Councillor Khan. Did you want to come in on this particular topic?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask, obviously I'm active on social media. I actually missed it. So was it aimed at a selective audience, or was it through your own web, your Facebook page, or?
It was through the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner's Facebook page. But thank you for that feedback. We'll probably need to push it more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Vaughan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Referring to 317 on page 29 of the pack, talking about the Divert Plus custody intervention, I was thrilled, I have to say, to see the reference to the speech and language therapy approach to dealing with young people who are very vulnerable in that particular sense, up against a system which is almost impermeable in terms of the language that's used in courts and during the proceedings leading to court. I know from experience that roughly 50% of adult male prisoners have literacy levels at or below what is expected of an 11-year-old child. When you look to numeracy, it's about 65% have lacking numeracy levels at or below what would be expected of an 11-year-old child. It's the first time I've actually seen anything official to confirm what I had suspected for a long time, that speech and language therapy could be a way of getting upstream of offending in future.
Can I come back on this? Because the cohort we've been working with, 82% of them have speech and language difficulties. Over 50% of them are known to CAMS. A lot of neurodiversity as well. But you can understand how somebody with speech and language difficulty who struggles to communicate can get themselves in bother. And actually, some of these people, if they've only had some speech and language therapy earlier on, they wouldn't have got themselves in a pickle. So I'm really encouraged. I've got lots of examples of the work we're doing, and how it's helping. For example, one of the young people is now, because they found out he didn't know the days of the week. There was a lot of difficulties there, and he was getting into terrible bother at school. But now he's in an alternative provision. Now, really, that should have been picked up, and he should have had an education, health, and social care plan already in place from his school, but he hadn't, and he was getting himself in a pickle. So, but now through the Divert Plus, he's had that wraparound care. His family are getting support. He's in an alternative provision and he's doing really well. Oh, and just got a note. Thank you, Sharon. I won't be subtle because you reminded me. When we're looking at commissioning services from now on, we're really going to focus on neurodiversity too.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can we turn to section 8.1, page 39, the thematic inspection of vetting, misconduct and misogyny? And it's probably worth reminding ourselves that this was commissioned by the Home Secretary following the murder of Sarah Everard and things that came out about police culture there. And if you look at the report, it talks about police officers being in a unique position to commit crime. And some of the things they say in there, that there are warning signs that the systems to prevent unsuitable applicants aren't working well enough, concerns about recruitment not being rigorous enough, and then there's a separate exercise, the online survey of officer experience, and the level of concerns, primarily from female officers, about level of sexual harassment and assault within the police. And the conclusion is, at this moment, it's too easy for the wrong people to both join and stay in the police, which is a pretty serious set of affairs, pretty damning set of affairs, really. And I know we lost 20,000 officers at the beginning of the last decade, and a lot of experience was lost there. A lot of experience, and so the rapid recruitment that's happened since then, you can see how these things can happen. Now, you've picked out some of the 43 recommendations, but I just wonder, what assurance have you sought from the Chief Constable about the culture in Nottinghamshire, and what action are being taken to make sure it doesn't apply to us? Thank you.
Thank you. I regularly seek reassurance, and it's something we regularly discuss at our accountability board. And the next accountability board, we're actually going to go through all of those 43 recommendations to check where we're at with them. But I'm in a good place here with the current Chief Constable because he is the national lead on vetting, and sets very high standards in Nottinghamshire. Just to be clear, most of our the huge majority of our police officers are absolute heroes and do some amazing work. But no, there is a tiny minority who should be called out, and out of our force, I'm happy they're being called out. And there's a very clear line in the sand of what is right and what is wrong in Nottinghamshire Police Force.
Yeah. There's a danger, isn't there, of being overly complacent on all this, saying a tiny number of police officers. I would like to believe that is the case.
Yeah.
But does that square with the level of concern, particularly say, of female police officers in the survey that the inspectorate published? I mean, the inspectorate are taking it very seriously. They seem to my mind to say this is a really crucial point in the police culture. So again, have you got any specific assurances from the Chief Constable? Have you taken specific action to see how far that those conditions apply in Nottinghamshire? Thank you.
So if I just talk about how it works in Nottinghamshire, we've got the professional standards department, who are I forgot what Hayley's title is. Detective Super, who my monitoring officer has regular meetings with. We have the complaints procedure in Nottinghamshire. So if people, which first goes to the police, but if they're not happy with the response that they get from the police, we oversee it out in our office. We take this incredibly seriously.
So the professional standards and the complaints you're talking about, are they complaints from police officers or complaints from the public?
It's both, and there's also really strong vetting as well.
Thank you. Did you want to come back?
Just, I think it's worth flagging, you know, and the National Inspectorate's report, Nottinghamshire was actually said good, and it's not easy to get a good in this area, and we got a good. I'm not complacent. I know we've got to be all over this, but I can assure you I'm taking it really seriously.
Thank you, Commissioner. I suppose, and it's heartening to hear that we have the leader with us still at the moment that's leading on this nationally. I suppose in time what we would look forward to receiving is this. You've explained it, and Nottingham are doing very well on this. But I guess it's what external validation do you look to achieve in the near future? And I suspect I see the Chief Constable is nodding his head. I think many organisations are coming under this sort of review, which is quite proper. But usually the way that you get greater assurance for the general public is that some external validation takes place at various stages. I'm not asking you to answer that now, but
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing that often allays anxiety that things are covered up.
But actually that's what Her Majesty's Inspectorate report was. That's an external people coming in to check where we're at in Nottinghamshire.
Linda, did you want to come in? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wooding.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I suppose what I'm really interested to know is about the level of confidence that there is out there to actually make a complaint, because my day job is I work as a trade union officer, and actually raising a complaint against a colleague who you might work with very closely, who you might rely upon for safety and backup, etc., or raising a complaint against a police officer is actually a big barrier for some people, isn't it? So I suppose it's really interesting to know what insight you get into the culture of the force, and what I'd be interested in is what reporting structures there are in place for people to make to be able to say confidently, either via an anonymous survey or by a speak up line or something like that. I mean, to actually, so that people can raise their concerns about an individual without being individually targeted by either the person they've actually complained about or that person's friends and colleagues. And so I think that is the very, police have a lot of powers over individuals externally and a lot of influence. They're expected to work as one team within the force as well, but that can create a corroding culture of, keep quiet, basically. So I suppose what we're really interested in is what's your insight in the Notts Police as far as that gives you that reassurance about the culture and the confidence that people would have to actually maybe report one of their colleagues or for a member of the public to report a police officer.
Thank you, Councillor Woodings, and you're completely right about the confidence and trust, because we need to get it right in the force to make sure we get it right with the public too. Actually, as he is behind me and is the lead, we do have anonymous surveys and anonymous ways of reporting, but technically, are you okay if I pass across to you, please?
Yeah, so you're right. Numerous routes. The key is prevention rather than cure. Leadership from the beginning, so all the new officers are greeted by either Steve or myself in terms of standard setting before they even hit the road, within their 20 weeks at headquarters and before they get their attested powers. Internal reporting is very strong, and internal reporting is anonymous. You can do it yourself, you can do it via a supervisor. There's 3 or 4 different ways internally that you can do it without even outing yourself. We have a whistleblower policy too. Most of our anti-corruption intelligence comes from within, probably about 99% to be honest, and you could say that across most police forces. Some of the outrageous things that we uncover and then prosecute, either criminally or misconduct-wise, the very huge majority emanates from a good, hard-working, good-standing cop standing up and standing on It's not from members of the public. And from a force perspective, we have a very strong anti-corruption unit. We proactively develop intelligence that we get from internally, that we get from external agencies, and we also get from third sector partners. And we develop that and use that to inform our vetting decisions. Vetting nationally has been an area of focus for policing because some forces have dropped the ball a little bit over a period of time and didn't respond to previous inspections terribly well. And having worked at the HMI on this area of business, we have got good because we are bang up to date with all our vetting, all our re-vetting, our vetting for specialist posts. In fact, the only recommendation I think of worth was, can you tell us the disproportionality in your vetting decisions? In other words, the people that you turn down and don't allow into the organisation. And the reason we haven't done it is because you could count them on one hand, actually. But nevertheless, we had that one small recommendation. The other aspect, just to broaden it slightly, is to say that when we do get a complaint from the public over an expression of dissatisfaction, the majority of those are to do with sort of service level, not getting back to people, incivility type things. We get very few complaints with regards to misuse of position for sexual purposes. But wherever we get anything like that, there is a full investigation that sits behind it. And all the outcomes are published on our website. We're really transparent with it all.
Thank you, Mrs. Harding. Did you want to come in on this one?
I think the Chief Constable's answered a lot of the questions I was going to ask, but I did wonder perhaps if the Commissioner could produce a report on complaints about the police force so that the panel can actually understand the procedures and the numbers, so that we're more aware and we can actually relate this to the public and be more transparent about how things are in the police force, and hopefully the public will be more confident in the police force as a result of that.
Look, it is on our website, but we're happy to put it all together. But also, as at the last accountability meeting, I had a full briefing on vetting and the complaints procedure. So I've got all that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Carlton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question that's actually quite dear to my heart, and that's around mental health. We've said for a good number of years there's a mental health crisis in this country. Since then, we've had a pandemic and the fallout from, and now with the pressures of the cost of living. So turning to page 43 of your report under the heading Responding, under line B1, improving response to mental health and multiple and complex needs. And I acknowledge in your opening remarks, the individual that you referenced with the pressing in a crisis, pressing the button. But I was just wondering what action you're taking to progress this area, and whether you could give a little bit of an explanation as to why it has an red indicator around it. Thank you.
So on the delivery plan, yes. Thank you. The amount of calls we get that are actually mental health related is shocking. In our control room, 80% of the calls are non-crimes. Out of that, a big chunk of them are related to mental health. The police absolutely have a duty under section 2. Is it section 2? Article 2, not section 2. Sorry, to keep people safe. But we're not always the right people to be doing that. And we know that our NHS is really squeezed, ambulances are really squeezed, other services are really squeezed, and we're left picking up things that really should have been addressed before it got to crisis stage. I had a meeting with the director of the Integrated Care Board, and to really push back, just to say that this isn't always police's responsibility. We want to keep people safe, but actually we want people to be in the right place. So we've got a really strong offer. We have in our control room, we have community mental health practitioners. We have the triage cars where we have a community mental health nurse who can go out with a response officer, which is great because that means that the mental health nurse can access Rio, so can see the background of the person they're going to see, and the police officer can access our system, so we can join it all up. But too often it gets to crisis point. So we'll continue to push partners to make sure that it doesn't always fall on the police. And that's why we're putting together the care crisis concordat and trying to use my convenient powers. And I'm hoping for a meeting with that before Christmas, but it might be the new year.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for that response. It was really helpful, and certainly into your closing remarks, if there's anything I can do through my portfolio position in this authority, and I'm looking at my opposite number from the city, from a public health approach, and I completely agree with you. There's a lot more work that we need to do on the prevention rather than addressing sort of the cure angle. I'm just going to change tack slightly, but stay on mental health and looking at the police force itself. As Commissioner, what sort of assurances do you take from the Chief Constable? Obviously, we do always sort of look at those out in the public and the victims of crime. But what about our police officers in the terms of their own mental health?
And I do ask these questions because there's a shocking fact that more officers die of committing suicide than they do in line of duty, and that is just shocking. In Nottinghamshire, we've got a really good wellbeing offer, and there's counsellors you can access. There's your team around you, but acutely aware of it, and I'm always asking the question. But we do have a really wellbeing champions going around with the yellow lanyards on. People looking out for each other, plus the external people can talk to if they don't want to talk in their team. Oh yeah, did you add that, Sharon? I won't pretend I didn't think of it.
So yes, when we've scrutinised this with FOSS previously, they've got, as Caroline says, really good wellbeing offer. So they do things like Wellbeing Wednesday. They provide a number of support services as well to help people with their general resilience. So things like financial advice and support as well. Getting stress levels in check. Coping with traumatic incidents as well. So when police have attended and officers have been involved in things that expose them to quite highly traumatic events, there is really good services available in force. And we've asked this question quite a few times and had good assurance around it.
We have. And one of my favourite things is the wellbeing dogs that come round. But that's just me personally. But it is, isn't it? Yeah. But I know that sounds trivial, but there's so much happening. But it has to be. I spoke with a gentleman just this morning who works in personal protection. Some of the stuff he sees, I said, how do you cope with that? And he said, because of my team. No. We're always asking the question, and I always ask when I speak, what can I do to support you as Police and Crime Commissioner? And people are happy with the support they're getting.
Some of us were very fortunate to meet the dogs when we came to visit. I don't want to insult yourself or the Chief Constable, but I have to say I think that was one of the most favoured things as we went through.
They weren't the wellbeing dogs. They were the bitey and sniffy dogs. The wellbeing dogs are something very different.
I think any dog that you greet that's good.
Well, Biscuit does it for you, doesn't she?
Thank you. Did you want to come in, Mr. Buckle?
Thank you, Chair. Many organisations now recruit or train staff in the workplace as mental health first aiders. Does that apply equally within Nottinghamshire Police?
Yes, it does. Yes. As well as coaching and mentoring. Yeah. I'm going to pretend I had that idea myself, as does coaching and mentoring.
if people are content to move on, Councillor Cray has 2 questions to put to you.
Yeah, right. Good afternoon, everybody. Just firstly, I want to say thank you for the funding we got for Eastwood, and I really enjoyed going up there. The 2 PCSOs they do a cracking job up there. They're so dedicated and love where they are, don't they? I think we're dead lucky with some of the PCSOs we got, and the drug dealers need to be aware of them up there. So fair play to the PCSOs in Eastwood, the cracking people. And then. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There was something else I forgot I was going to say now. I'll remember in a minute. Oh, I know. I just wanted to also say thank you to Inspector Mike Ebbins in Beeston, because Operation Potassium, as you know about, is doing really well. It's positive. They're out there. It's not just the naughty kids, because I hate that word. We need to engage with these youngsters, and that's what's happening. So that kind of leads on to my next question. But I just want to say thank you to the Kaya Development Project and Support Through Sport, who are actually working in Beeston now, working with the youngsters, because we need to find out what they want. We can't just keep saying naughty kids are getting into trouble. They're all kids that's getting into trouble. We need to get to the root of it, don't we? So it's groups like that. So thank you for your funding for those kind of things. So the first one is page 4382, is the Youth Outreach Programme. So please, can you give an explanation around the red indicator, commission and implement a targeted youth outreach programme, and what action you are taking to progress it? That's my first question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that particular youth outreach programme, we did go out to commission it, but the responses we get didn't quite fit. So rather than get it not exactly what we wanted, we've done an engagement piece, and actually we've now got eight different people who are interested in getting involved with it, and it will be going out to tender again shortly. But I wanted to get it right. With regard to Operation Potassium, just so you know what it is, it's targeting antisocial behaviour with young people in Beeston, particularly people. I think we spoke about it at one of our panels, didn't we, Councillor? It was young people who were jumping on the tram and not paying for a ticket, and ended up in Beeston and trying to buy alcohol and causing lots of mischief. So there's been a really active crackdown on them, and a crackdown on those people who are selling alcohol to them that shouldn't have been. So it's been there's still more to do, but we are all over it.
I say, and the important thing is, I think, is talking to the kids as well. I know there's these groups out there, like you said, that put ideas forward, but I think it is important to talk to the kids on the parks, that's on the streets, because they know what they want. We don't, do we? And I think if you talk to them, ask them what you want, then sometimes you can fit in your services around what they want. But getting them to tell you what they want is quite hard. I've got a daughter that I say, "What do you want?" I don't know. Well, I don't if you don't, but you know, we're trying, aren't we? And I think it's really good we're doing that. So thank you for that. So my second question then is, there have been recent articles in the media talking about the impact of the cost of living crisis on crime rates and the types of crimes that have been committed. Please, can you explain how the cost of living crisis is affecting priorities in your Make Not Safe plan, any adjustments you've made and actions you are taking? Thank you.
Sadly, we're aware that when people struggle for money, they can be more shoplifting, for example. And it has been in some areas. So it's operationally, it'll be up to the chief and to direct his team how he deals with that. But we are always revisiting.
I think one of the things on that as well is some of the supermarkets and that, when they catch people, they just let them off. I don't know what we can do about that one to encourage them to ring you guys up, because sometimes when you let someone off, they're just going to go. It doesn't discourage them, does it? They're just going to go around the street and do it again, because they know if it's under a certain amount of money, a certain shop will let them go. I think it's educating the shopkeepers as well, but I don't know who would do stuff like that. I don't know.
We're already are doing stuff with that, with Shopwatch and the radios and the bid work that we do, the Business Improvement District. It's not ideal to let people get away with stuff, because then they'll carry on. And actually, some of our most prolific shoplifters, I give an example in Mansfield, there was 5 really prolific shoplifters. They were all given, and I'm going to get the term wrong. Was it dispersal? What's the dispersal? Dispersal orders. 4 of them broke it. They're now in jail. They're all over it.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor?
No, I was going to say something I shouldn't, so I won't say that. I'll tell you.
In that case, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. There were two recommendations which we fulfilled in scrutinising the Commissioner's update report, so thank you for that, Commissioner. If we can move then to item 7, which is the performance update report. I think we may have just a few questions on this, but over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you. If I just go through a few positives and a few negatives in the update report, if that's okay. Positive outcomes for burglary. In Nottinghamshire, we're at 8.2%, which is significantly higher than the rest of England and Wales, and regionally 6.4%. We've got the reporting of domestic abuse has increased, and the reporting of sexual offences has increased. What's interesting about this, we haven't, from the survey that we do in our office, we haven't actually seen more instances happening. We think there's more people having confidence to report, which is something I was really keen on. The integrated offender management, 70% reduction in reoffending risk. The 999 call answering, you can see our demand is massively increasing, but abandonment rates remain really low and comparatively below pre-pandemic level. We've continued to have an increase in the number of deployable police officers, 10% more than we had a year ago. And ongoing improvements with the Victims Code of Practice is up from 90% to 96% since March 2020. Another bits that we need to give some extra focus to. First time entrance into the criminal justice system. Now, this is something we're working with the City Youth Justice Management Board to put a task and finish group together to examine these trends. You'll see 25% up in the last year and 7% on pre-COVID baseline. We're exploring opportunities to strengthen diversion from the criminal justice system via out-of-court disposals, particularly community resolutions, and to a wider use of Outcome 22. So that's youth educational diversity activity, which will not result in the child becoming a first-time entrant. What's interesting, if we do that, it doesn't count as a positive crime outcome, but it's the right thing to do. You'll see that violent knife crime has increased 21% in the last year, so it's 10% higher than pre-pandemic baseline. Now, nationally, it's increased. It's not just us, but we had a real group of incidents in March 2023. Really committed to that long-term public health approach, working with the BRU. You'll see really tackling possession of weapons. That our proactive knife team. We've got 30% more weapons in than in the last year. And I'm really we talked about Youth Endowment Fund Focused Deterrent, which is a partnership approach with the police, youth justice and probation, housing providers, faith leaders, school and community groups to tackle knife crime. And we're also doing an internal review of knife crime. The other negative thing which is continuing, and again, it's not just here in Nottinghamshire, is the public confidence. Last week I was at a meeting with the Home Office, and they're actually considering, rather than it being a police and crime plan in the future, it changing to become a police crime and confidence plan, because nationally they're seeing real issues in deterioration of public confidence, and we're looking that we're going to bring a confidence piece back to you next year, because we're doing a lot of work around that. Yeah, I've just got a little piece of paper to say Craig has an update on knife crime stats. Can I bring you in, please, Chief?
Yeah, just to say that only read this report this morning, but the figures on knife crime are not what I've been briefed on. So compared to the baseline of 2019, we're running about 10% under that figure. The Home Office have just run the national statistics for all forces for the last 2 years, and actually it shows a reduction for us. So we're still in a really healthy position. Knife crime has increased compared to the last lockdown year, but compared to the baseline, it's under, and we're in a healthy position. So I'm sure we'll probably just need to discuss some of the typos in there.
Thank you for that clarification. It was one of the things that came up during our discussion earlier, was the figures around knife crime, particularly if you move that across to headlines in local newspapers, you tend to think, oh yes, this feels about right. So I think it's interesting, a bit of clarification. I'm not sure that everyone could hear. Did everyone hear the clarification that the chief? Oh, yeah, I think everyone heard that. So thank you for that.
Sorry, Chair, could we just have some clarification of the figures, because our report talks about an increase in violent knife crime, and then it talks about improvement in identifying possession of weapon offences as well, which is technically an increase but might show that the targeting is actually working. And then there's also what you would call weapon enabled crime as well, where there's a weapon present but it's shown but not wielded. So I don't know if you've got the up-to-date figures with you to be able to share the accurate figures on that. Thank you.
Do you want to pass it to her?
Okay. To give it, these are the most up-to-date figures we have, which go up to about the 15th of November, as in terms of the report that this obviously takes place as only a week ago. Assault with injury with knife crime is down about 16% against the baseline. The robbery is down 42% involving a knife, so serious violent definition baseline. Sexual offences has gone up, but very, very small numbers in relation to that report, so that's only gone up by 2 offences. But the other areas that we have, which are sort of slightly more significant, so wounding and endangering of life has gone down by 18%. Wounding and endangerment of life, so the serious sort of the top end of GBH offences have gone down by 18%, which takes those levels down year to date against our baseline by 7.6%. 2019 year to date data, so between April and now.
I think for the purpose of clarity and openness and accuracy, it would be helpful for us to know which ones we're going to rely on. If that means issuing an addendum for us to publish, I think that would be more helpful than trying to capture bits of it here, because obviously these papers are in the general public arena. They do have the figures in. It sounds as if some of the figures have appropriately been amended, and I think it would be more helpful, Commissioner, probably to have that amendment sent to the office, and then we can clarify the figures rather than trying to do bits of it inconsistently. And I don't mean that in any pejorative way, but I was trying to capture things, and I know I probably haven't caught all of the things that were being said. Would that be helpful to members to have just a small updated arrangement?
Thank you, Chair. Figures get updated all the time, and so it's really difficult. When these were published a couple of weeks ago, these are the figures we had. Yeah.
But maybe that's something we can talk about outside the meeting, as to if we're not in sync with some of your dates, it may be that we can arrange to have some sort of late paper coming in as an addendum, so that we all have the same figures, because these are quite crucial figures for the public as well. Yeah. And it's therefore very important to have really up-to-date information if we can. It's just a question of our organising that collectively together. Thank you, and thank you for the officers for telling us that actually things are probably not quite as bleak as originally we thought. Sorry to interrupt. I was on my panel here. Had you finished your presentation, Commissioner, or were you still? Okay, So let's start with, I think I've got Councillor Ellis first.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my question's a broad picture, and I know that for the last couple of years, COVID lockdown has bedeviled crime figures, and we've seen crime figures drop down significantly, and ASB go up significantly. We know that's part of definition and recording. But just looking at some of the figures that you provided, page 61, it says neighbourhood crime is up 15%. Page 69, victim-based crime is increasing each period over the last 2 years and is now 17% higher. And page 70, all sexual offences are nearly 20% higher. And like I said, there's been a reduction in ASB. So from a strategic point of view, what's your assessment? Are we back to normal? Are we still getting back to normal after COVID? Because these are worrying trends if just taking at face value. So how much credence do you attach to the trend in crime?
In the control room, it's busier than it was pre-COVID, so it is. I'm really pleased we've got more officers, but we have a lot more work to do. If I pass over to Dan with regards to the stats on this, would that be okay, Dan?
Yeah, sure. In general terms, we are still seeing kind of a reduction overall in victim-based crime compared to the pre-COVID period. And what we have seen is some of the sort of violent crime categories increase over the last year to a level slightly higher than the original baseline. But positively, we're still seeing a much lower rate of acquisitive crime, certainly serious acquisitive crime, your neighbourhood crimes, burglaries, vehicle crimes. On the pre-COVID period. So I think ultimately the last year we're starting to get to a position where we can more reliably compare ourselves to the pre-COVID period. We're seeing a new norm in which the profile of crime has changed somewhat, but overall we are still seeing lower overall levels of victim-based crime. Interestingly, also just to add to that, we're in the process of undertaking our police and crime needs assessment for this year. And in addition to profiling just the volume of crime, we're also looking at levels of crime harm, and we are seeing some really interesting distinctions on the pre-COVID level certainly in terms of offences such as domestic abuse, where the levels of overall crime harm are much lower than they were pre-pandemic. So it's not just about the numbers presented; it's about kind of the level of kind of crime harm as well that's being experienced.
Do you want to come back, Councillor?
I'd just like, if you don't mind, if you can elaborate on that a little bit more. So does that mean that we begin statistics that are different, that try and pull out the harm as opposed to a broad figure in crime?
I think we do need to reflect on that because it tells a very different story. Yeah, just in understanding the impact of a lot of the crime prevention and early intervention measures. It's something that we haven't tended to focus on significantly, as well as kind of the rise in online fraud and cyber enabled crime, which is certainly spiked during the pandemic, but is still seeing kind of an underlying increasing trend. So I think the whole kind of profile of crime and victimisation has shifted somewhat, and I think at some point we have to sort of reflect on how that's changed and what it means for communities.
So the answer to my question, just trying to get an idea whether we're back to normal, is we're not back to normal yet.
I think we're seeing a new norm.
Yeah. Particularly with the online side of things, and we are including questions around that on our police and crime survey now to really understand, and also we're digging more into feelings of safety as well in our police and crime survey.
Thank you for that. And just a quick question from me. I'm not sure if it's to you, Commissioner, or to Dan, but at some point, presumably, we're going to stop measuring against 2019, and we'll have a platform at which we're then going to measure and move forward. Is that 2021, 2022, 2023? Any advance? Because there comes a point where it's not helpful to reflect back to as long ago as 2019. That's the point I'm trying to make.
It was just to try and reflect back pre-COVID, and when I became Police and Crime Commissioner, it was not long post-COVID, so I needed a baseline to measure against.
I also think over the last 12 months we have reached that kind of new norm. I think we can start to develop a baseline now, but it's also, I think we need to be mindful of the changing environment and the range of factors that are likely to impact on crime and community safety over the next sort of 12 months, and increasingly we want to move towards benchmarking, comparing ourselves to other similar areas and police forces in terms of understanding a relative performance position, if you like.
Thank you for that. Councillor, Mr. Bob Vaughan Newton is next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One of them is probably quite simple, and it's just me being a bear of little brain. Page 65 of the pack, there's a table, visible, accessible and responsive crime and policing services. Towards the bottom of the table, there's a comparison between the number of deployable officers in full-time equivalents and the officer service strength in full-time equivalents. To me, it makes sense that the officer service strength in full-time equivalents figure is larger than the number of deployable officers. And so it is all the way across until you come to the 12 months to September 2022, at which point the number of deployable officers exceeds the officer service strength.
That can't be right. Well, that's just checking. You're reading the figures there, Bob. That's there's obviously a mistake there. We can't have more deployable officers than we have overall service strength. We need to amend that. Sorry.
If you could, you've reached the end of the rainbow.
Wouldn't it be brilliant? No, there's an error there. I apologise.
Okay.
Sorry, I've not spotted that.
Can I just check, Councillor Introni, were you wanting to come on the same topic?
Thank you. Okay. Page 62, you mentioned that the number of first-time entrants in the criminal justice system has been rising and has now exceeded the baseline figure. What confidence do you have that the services you've commissioned through the VRU are doing what they are supposed to, and how are you holding them to account?
Through the regular monitoring that we do with the VRU, but it's not just the VRU that needs to tackle that. It's working with our partners in the criminal justice system too.
Particularly
the City Youth Justice Management Board, we're actually, the VRU's been tasked to convene a task and finish group because we do need to look at the trends.
Thank you. You didn't want to come back then. Okay, thank you. In that case, Councillor Introni, thank you.
Thank you. Just coming back to the question on deployable officers, and I hear what you say that the number must be wrong, but we say in 3.5 that deployable officer headcount increased by 9.9%, whereas that number there is only 5.4%, the 2328, which would mean that number must be more if it's 9.9%. And I would also add in that on that same number, if we look at the precept and budget reports that were presented in February this year, under the workforce plan, it said quite clearly that the police officer full-time employees, full-time equivalents, and I get that it's a slightly different number, but even if I compare that to the 2290, we said that the opening balance for April was 2342, and there just seems to be some either contradiction or lack of clarity, and with the greatest of respect, these are the very basic elementary numbers that people want to see, and we shouldn't be getting them wrong. Thank you.
I completely accept that. The number's more like 2,400.
I think it's, yeah, I think there's a digit is wrong. I think it's a 3 rather than meant to be a 3.
Thank you.
we thought we slipped those little things in just to test if people were reading the papers. So, but you'll clarify after the meeting what the exact figures. Thank you. Councillor Khan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My questions just, well, I've got a few, but first one was just to carry on from the first time entrance into the criminal justice system. About 5 years ago, when I was portfolio holder for employment, we started a UCAN project, and I know it's still running, but you make reference to the Divert Plus, but nothing to do with the UCAN. And at the time, the then Police Crime Commissioner Paddy Tipping was part of that. We worked closely with the police, and we looked at the young people that are on the verge of criminality or siblings of people. And I'm just kind of a bit surprised that like we're trying to reinvent the wheel here rather than looking at stuff that's worked. And we know with that in the city, we did see some positive results where young teenagers don't actually want to get a 9 to 5 job. They're not interested. They're involved in drugs and stuff. They know how to weigh things. They want to be their own bosses. So just saying that we can get them into a job isn't going to get them away from that. So that UCAN project did really work. So I'd be interested just to know, are you actually up to speed with that, and is there any work still happening? Just following on then, it's probably just going back to the knife crime question. So I'm on, obviously, as portfolio holder for safety in Nottingham City. I get the papers from the CDP board, Crime Drug Partnership, also get a fortnightly report on the knife crime statistics. They're all saying knife crime offences are going up. So the Chief Constable is telling us something else. Your obviously report is clearly saying something else. So my concern is who's telling the truth, who's accurate there, because as a city resident, all I know is we're seeing more knife crime and more stabbings happening. You would associate that with nighttime economy. We're seeing in broad daylight in town, people stabbing each other, no fear of being caught, being on camera or anything. And that's just not. A couple of weeks ago, the city came to a standstill on a Friday because somebody had decided to stab somebody and could. And then obviously the police blocked off roads, caused all sorts of chaos. But that's not the only one. We've had teenagers stab each other in Market Square, And my concern is, it seems like there isn't really a deterrent because young people just don't care now. They're just carrying knives was one issue, but now they're just broad daylight stabbing each other. Also in the report, it talks about public confidence being down. I understand the wider national trend, but in here, and I know how you kind of always push for targets, and you're about outcome based. So it talks about you've got an ambition for an improvement of 57.5. Nottingham South, Nottingham, Mansfield and Ashfield and Bassett Lawn, Newark and Sherwood are all below that. What are we actually going to do to push that confidence up?
If you kept going first, and I've got lots to say too.
If I might just address the point of the figures. So the papers, when they were published 10 days ago or something, we had a set of figures presented by Force. Clearly what's happened since then is we've had up-to-date figures. So I just want, I know it might seem like a contradiction, but actually both sets of figures taken on board. There have been a few errors in our paper, but both sets of figures are actually right. So the ones that the Chief has presented today are the absolute up-to-date figure, and they should be taken as the most correct figure. Does that help? There's a lapse of about 2 weeks between the figures, but they were drawn from the same source.
If I could just come back on that then. So I kind of get that. It depends on so it's the kind of window you're looking at. But if you compare it over, you could compare it over before COVID, you can compare it to 6 years, because I've got two different reports. One compares it to 6 years, from now to 6 years past, it shows it's on the increase. If you see it from 18 months from now, it's on the increase, because you used to get 31 points of incidences a month, and we're on 36. So again, whichever way I read it, I still feel it's on the increase.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Commissioner, I don't know if you want to pick this up particularly here, or whether there seems to be perhaps an opportunity for some consultation outside the meeting. We've already agreed that there's to be an addendum with some very up-to-date figures, but I'm just anxious that with Councillor Khan, there's obviously it's not just a question of the figures. I think it's also something about the operational confidence within the city, which really isn't necessarily for debate here, because it's an operational matter. And I just wondered, Commissioner, if you'd want to perhaps have a discussion, or I know that the chief or the deputy might want to come in. I've just noticed, but it's down to you really.
Okay, thank you. The when we're talking about knife crime going up, going down, when you compare it to last year with some of the, obviously COVID restrictions still in, it is going up slightly. So to say that knife crime isn't going up is inaccurate. So it's going up. When you compare it to the baseline back in a period of normality with that whole year picture, that's when it's still going down. So we're not complacent in any way. Certainly the work that we're doing with our knife crime team, which obviously I know that you're aware of some of the good work, they're getting really high positive outcomes on their stop searches. They're getting really good sentences on some of the people that they're locking up, and a lot of the serious violence that we get, we detect. We do a lot of good work on through the criminal justice system. So we're not complacent, but I think obviously there are barriers, and we can sit down outside and obviously show you the different levels of stats that we're using. But like I say, it's going down against the baseline, but it has gone up compared to last year, which is some of the stats that obviously have been quoted.
Okay. Thank you. Is it okay if I just pick up on a couple of the other points? I'm completely with you about trying to get young people into jobs. Personally, I don't know about the UCAN project. I'm not sure if that hooks in with the violence reduction youth, some of the mentoring work we do. I know we do, for example, Switch Up. They're commissioned to work with young people from funding that we've given them, and they work really hard about getting people into employment, and there's lots of other ones that do it too, and we also hook in with DWP as well. With regards to the my ambition for 57% greater than confidence, I'm really keen on that, and when the new chief constable, when she comes in, she knows that's something we're going to be really pushing together. We're doing some work in our office to understand why different areas are at different levels. We're going to be doing focus groups, we're doing more surveys, and I know we're coming back to talk about confidence the new year, but it's really important that we get the confidence up.
I've got Councillor Woodings and Councillor McRae.
I mean, I would say, what I'm like for this stuff. It really gets to me. One incident of knife crime is one too many. And I think the police are doing a good job. And you always hear me say thank you, because I'd tell you outside the meeting if I wasn't going to. We need to do more. And what's that saying? They say it takes a village to raise a child, doesn't it? Nottingham's a big village. There's more good in Nottingham than there is bad. We need to do more. I think schools need to take more responsibility. I don't mind saying it, because there's certain schools, I'm not going to name them, but they must have carpets massive. I'm surprised someone fell over what they've swept underneath it. They need to admit there's a problem and let the groups and organisations go into the schools and talk to the kids. And when I say schools, I don't mean comprehensives. I mean your younger ones, because I talk to the youngsters at Stapleford Youth Club, and it's in the 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They're saying it's the ones younger than that's carrying. Now, I know it's only a minimal amount, but again, one is too many. I also think we seem to concentrate on, and I only picked this up from talking to the kids in Beeston the other week, we concentrate on the lads a lot. We don't concentrate enough on the girls. And like boxing, brilliant. Some girls like it. Football, some of the girls like that as well. But we was talking to the girls, they wanted to do things like ice skating, they wanted to do rollerblading and stuff like that, and even cookery classes and stuff. Things that, like, I always remember my mum teaching my sister how to cook all the time. You don't see that so much anymore, and we need to try and get that back again. There's an element of parental responsibility as well. There's got to be, because I'm not saying you know what your kids are doing all the time. I know my mum and dad didn't know what I was doing out when I was out spray painting trains and stuff, but that was years ago. I don't do it anymore. But what I'm saying is we need to concentrate, and I think we need more people to look at what the girls want as well, because they are involved in this stuff. They do end up carrying things certain times. Sometimes the lads, peer pressure and a million things that you always know about. We need to look at more what we can do for the young girls as well. But I do think the schools have got to admit there's a problem, and then we can deal with it instead of pretending, it's not at our school. It is at their school. And I'd say most schools, like drug dealing outside schools, is a big thing in that. But I'm not criticising the police. I never remember the police being on every street corner. Never. And I think they do a cracking job. they're never going to be on every street corner. Crime has changed a lot. A lot of it's online and that. But when people say there's not enough police around, I don't know if there's enough police around or not. But I know the police have got to do a cracking job. And an incident's going to happen regardless of where the police are. Do you know what I mean? Because you're never going to have them on every street corner. These criminals, they're not daft, are they? Like someone said earlier. They're very clever business people. They're just selling the wrong product. So change the product you're selling and get a different job, and you're going to have some proper money that you can keep. Because being a criminal, it's not a full-time thing, is it? You're going to get caught someday because we've got some good police after everybody. But we need to look at more that we can do for the young girls as well, and I think that's a really important thing.
Thank you. We'll leave that with the Commissioner and team, I think. Thank you. Councillor Woodings.
Well, thank you, Chair. I was going to follow up about the knife crime figures, and obviously we'll wait for an updated report on that. So I just wanted to highlight a different part of the of your performance report, and obviously, obviously it's phrased as far as positive exceptions and negative exceptions. But one of the areas that you haven't focused on, I appreciate you can't report on everything, is that within hate crime, there has been, and this is since the baseline of 2019, there's been a 50% increase in hate occurrences based on sexual orientation and also hate occurrences based on transgender. I'm sure all of my colleagues here and everyone in this room would condemn the level of toxicity that's been aimed at transgender people on a national level and through the media and through social media as well. But it seems to be playing out as far as our incidences of hate crime are concerned. Can I just ask, it's a bit of an exception because in the other areas we're seeing a decrease in hate crime and stable figures from 2019, but this is the exception. Can you tell me if you sort of got any thoughts about an action plan that we might be able to put into place in order to address this situation and have some more effective action on the people committing these crimes to make it known that it's unacceptable to do that?
Thank you, Councillor Woodings. And can I just assure you, you'll never hear me trying to, with regards to transgender. Just yesterday, you'll see, like it was transgender awareness day, and for those people that have been murdered, and that's what I put a post out about, because I actually it's very close to my heart. I've seen the figures and they have gone up, but actually if you look at my police and crime plan, and I actually wanted more reporting of hate crime. I feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg with getting it reported, and I want to encourage more people to report it, more people to know that when they do report it, how seriously we take it. In Nottinghamshire Police, how serious Nottinghamshire Police take it. And actually, of those that do report it, 82% of them are happy with the response they get from Nottinghamshire Police. But what I do want to encourage is more reporting and more bystander, more people also helping and calling it out when they hear hate crime that's not acceptable. Like we do with misogyny, I want, it's our Nottinghamshire, it's the team here. And we need to make sure that hate crime is not acceptable here. We've done a big campaign called Take Aim Against Hate Crime, and that was done. And I will be talking about hate crime a lot because it's just not right.
Thank you, Chair. Just we're in that strange situation where we want more people to report, but then that shows an increase in incidences.
Yeah.
And so I suppose the interesting thing will be to do our perception surveys from that community of individuals as to how confident they feel to come forward, because the statistics don't really tell us how people are feeling. My gut instinct is that all of the nastiness on social media has contributed to the increase in reporting, because maybe there are just more incidents out there. But I think it is a good thing that people are coming forward, and I would join you really to encourage people to report this through to the police.
Yeah, and can I also add, we're proactively trying to reach out we now have a community engagement officer working for the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, really reaching out to our amazing diverse communities to make sure they know what is a hate crime, because not everybody is actually aware what hate crime is. So we need some education so they know what people can report as well. It's a really proactive thing now. Okay.
That sorry, it was closing off that point that this is not just about increasing the reporting. What we should always be doing as an office, and what we work on is how that influences our commissioning, our allocation of resources, for instance. So if we need different types of approaches to supporting victims of hate crime, for instance, that increase in reporting actually helps us because we understand the locations, we understand the type of harm, the type of hate crime, and so on.
Thank you. That takes us to the end of that particular paper. Thank you. The two recommendations again were around scrutiny, which is being conducted. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 8. Thank you. Your paper on government grant income.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, if I ask our Chief Exec to talk to this. Thank you.
Very many thanks, Chair. So the paper tries to set out the very many complex grant streams that we manage through the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, and tries to give people a flavour of where we're at now, as well as trying to alert you to some of the risk issues that we potentially face in future as well. In terms of recommendations, panel is recommended to note the report, but I'm sure you'll also want to ask questions as well. I think it's fair to say, if we look at section 3, most people will be familiar with the fact that Police and Crime Commissioner's Office have been were remitted rather the Victim Services Grant and Community Safety Grant when they were created back in 2011, and we have been funneling that income stream for quite a long time. What we've tried to do in this report is just give you a sense of the scale and some of the complexity that we deal with. So total commissioning budget for 22-23, you'll see it 3.3 on page 75, is currently 12.4 million. That includes PCC and local partner funding as well. We are actually the lead commissioner in terms of sexual violence commissioning, so we do work with our partners in both local authorities, upper tier local authorities, in terms of commissioning in a coordinated and cohesive way there. Otherwise, just in terms of giving you an understanding, the budget that we receive across all of our grants, it's fairly evenly split across the Make Not Safe plan of the 3 kind of core themes of preventing, responding and supporting as well. So tries to bring a holistic approach to how the money is spent through our office. We do handle a number of time limited and restricted government grants, and there is a bit of a cliff edge, if you like, in 2025. We do receive a number of victim services grants as well. So 3.4 currently details the victim services grant. That's a long-standing annual grant, almost certain to continue beyond March 2025. I think one of the things that we wanted to flag up in this report is that kind of, we have to horizon scan and we have to plan and try and commission as efficiently and effectively as possible. And we are cognizant of the fact that we've had 3-year settlement, if we look at 3.5 in relation to a lot of our community safety grants and victim services grants. But in 2025, we do expect those amounts to halve unless something else is coming forward from Home Office, Ministry of Justice, from whom we receive our primary grant funding. We flag up here that well, there might be a replacement, so I don't want to sound like a complete doom-monger. There might be replacement funds, but as it stands, unless alternative provision is put forward, there are likely to be adverse implications for the continuity of local services. That's a challenge for us, that's a challenge for our local partners as well, because obviously we want to provide the best support level that we possibly can for things like victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and so on. And then all of the other work that we do besides. And you know, Commissioner, we weren't able to include all of that detail, but things like Divert Plus, etc., some of the youth outreach work that we do, some things that we do around hate crime, around people with mental health issues as well. What we've tried to do in this paper as well is just set how we use our funding in the context of our partnership working as well. And sort of recent examples of that are how we try to use it in a complementary way with things like the funding that the upper tier local authorities, Notts County and Nottinghamshire City Council, receive for the domestic abuse statutory duty, and more recently for the From Harm to Hope strategic targets that they've been set as well. So work with them very closely in terms of understanding their commissioning intentions and trying to, look at that data and constantly trying to plug those gaps as well. Just wanted to add though that, with that 2025 date in mind, potential loss of grants that we receive in our office, and if that plays out into other public sector partnerships as well, that will have a compound effect and create pressure on the local community safety system as well. I won't go into the Chancellor's budget statement because I don't think there was a great deal of detail there in relation to public sector spending necessarily. So the challenge for us, I think, as we set out in 3.8, is just around that horizon scanning and risk mitigation. I think the challenge that we've been working through in the past year with our community safety partners is trying to make sure that every penny is spent, and that's connected with Commissioner's Make Not Safe plan, and it's completely defensible in terms of audit and public purse accountability as well. So just in terms of that risk mitigation work then, this is quite high level, but I think just to give a panel assurance that we have regular commissioning meetings through our office, try very hard to take a whole systems approach to assessing needs of vulnerable people, prioritising support and other functions to be provided. Absolutely try to conduct needs assessments so we're as evidence-based as we can be. And then we keep an eye on what works, so working in terms of understanding good practice used elsewhere. That might be in local authority services, third sector services, other police and crime commissioners, officers around the country, and other police forces actually. We keep an eye on all of that. Sometimes we do have to make hard decisions in terms of decommissioning services where we found that they're not particularly effective and where that's something else that warrants the reallocation of resources. One of the things that will, I think, be quite familiar to other people in public services is the short-termist nature of grant funding awards, and that's something that Commissioner takes particular interest in and uses her influence where possible, particularly to influence Ministry of Justice and Home Office in terms of those. Trying to get a good run in at tackling some of these issues. So we've got a more medium term as opposed to a short term approach. So yes, I think then we continue to do this collaboration and commissioning work in a partnership setting, working quite proactively with community safety partners, local domestic abuse partnership boards, combating substance misuse partnerships as well. In terms of the governance and accountability, we have previously, through this panel, talked about how some of the Make Not Safe grant funding has been transformed, but just to give partners further reassurance that we are also obliged to report our spending through our joint independent audit committee as well, so that there's solid internal controls, and that ourselves and the force are held to account just in terms of the use of our money there as well. I think this has been alluded to earlier in the Commissioner's update report, but I just wanted to flag to people that as well as working with partners and looking at data, we also try to listen to survivors' voice as well, victims' voices, in terms of understanding the shape and design of our services. A more recent example of that, of funding that we have received, children affected by domestic abuse, for instance, will actively work to capture young people's voices, and that will shape future commissioning. We've had some excellent examples of that, for instance, with commissioning of our sexual violence services, which have gained some renown as well. Organisationally, and currently, our office is managing over 180 separate contracts or grants agreement. We are a big area, and I think you would all agree that there's very different local needs across Nottinghamshire, and that means that we sometimes have to commission on a hyper-local basis to try and address particular needs in that location. And rural is obviously very different in terms of urban profile. We have different victims, as you might imagine, with very different needs. So there's quite a lot of complexity that's baked into how we deliver those services. And as Commissioner mentioned earlier, some of the other things that we're becoming more alive to is just helping victims and offenders, for whom we commission as well, be able to engage, get optimal impact from our services. So things having a mind to barriers such as speech and language issues, neurodiversity, and so on. I could go on and say about value for money and following due process, Chair, but we've set it out. We are absolutely compliant with contract standing orders. Myself and my other fellow statutory officer are all over this, and we are regularly scrutinised by our audit committee as well. But I think I will, with your permission, leave it there and take any questions that panel members might wish to ask.
Thank you, Sharon. That's a very comprehensive report, and 180, that has a ring, doesn't it? 180, yes, exactly. That's an awful lot of commissioning work that needs to go on behind the scenes, and obviously clearly very complex, some of these issues. So thank you very much for bringing us up to date with that. I was going to ask the question about the Chancellor's statement that you warned me not to ask, so I won't ask it then. I'm sure there will be plenty of time when we discuss the budgets. Are there any questions? Councillor McRae.
Yeah, it's not a question. I just want to say thank you. It's nice to finish on something positive, isn't it? So I just want to say thank you for all the work you're all doing. Your team in the background, we don't see them all the time, do we? So please pass on our thanks. I know we're getting our fair share in Broxtowe. A bit more would always be good, wouldn't it? But we're getting our fair share, and I'm sure other people are in their areas as well. But I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of Broxtowe Borough Council and all the residents as well, because it is making a difference in our area. So thank you.
Thank you for that commercial.
And if I could thank the team for doing this, I've got an amazing team in the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. The amount of work that team gets through is outstanding.
I think I would echo that. Co-commissioning is, unless you've been involved in it, is quite a complex issue, and particularly at times when future monies can't be guaranteed at this point. But that takes us to the end of business, technically. I'm not going to close the meeting for a moment because there is a certain person that we need to say our farewell to, and that, of course, is the Chief Constable. I'm going to embarrass him by saying that there were, and still are, one or two members on this panel who were present when we had the confirmatory hearing all those years ago. It seems quite a long time, because on the road to where we are today, we had Brexit, and he very kindly, along with the Commissioner at the time, gave us a few briefings in camera that were well received by members in terms of the planning for all sorts of things we weren't sure were going to happen. Of course, we didn't forecast and know anything about a pandemic that was going to hit us. And once again, we were very, very pleased and privileged to be able to have some briefings on just what was happening across the county. More importantly, you've brought an absolute new vision and vigour to Nottinghamshire Police. It's fair to say that several of us were here when things were pretty downbeat, I think it's fair to say. On the road to your new adventure in the West Midlands, having been in the East Midlands, you've grown the service. You've grown the service in stature, which is not an easy thing to do. The respect for Nottinghamshire Police now is well known, not just locally, but externally. And that, I think, is a mark of the leadership that you've brought to this force. You're going to be very, very much missed. We valued having you here. We hope that Kate will be as equally strong member. We know she's been trained in some of your measures, and we're sure that working with the Commissioner, we'll look forward to a continued future. But on behalf of this panel here, for which I've at the moment got the privilege of sitting in the chair, can we thank you, Craig, for your huge contribution, which is almost difficult to measure in terms of what you've brought to the stature of Nottinghamshire Police. And we wish you every success in the West Midlands.
Well, you've definitely embarrassed me, and thank you for those very, very kind words. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you for all your challenge and support, because those two things are important in the system in which we operate. They are to the PCC and they are to me as Chief Constable. And I think overall, we are in a good place and we are firmly back on the map. But it is a team effort. I've got a very good team, and we've got some exceptional officers and staff who just want the best for the public of Nottinghamshire, and I'm confident in their abilities going forward and in Kate's capabilities in continuing on the onwards and upwards trajectory. Thank you.
We do, of course, know the real reason why you're going. It's because there's no challenge in any building projects and any potential Lego. So we do really know why you're leaving us now, because there was nothing on the shopping list for us to purchase for you. So we wish you every success, Craig. Can I duly close the meeting?